Hey there, listener. We're about to embark on a wild journey through one of the most bizarre chapters in American history, where nuclear bombs weren't just weapons. They were the hottest ticket in town, the backdrop for glitzy parties, and the star of family vacations. So grab a snack and let's step back into the 1950s, when the U.S. turned the atom into a dazzling, dangerous spectacle. This is a story about Americans and their extreme nuclear adventures, a time when the apocalyptic power of the atom was repackaged as entertainment. Picture Las Vegas in its neon-drenched prime, where tourists flock to watch mushroom clouds bloom in the desert while sipping cocktails. Imagine beauty queens posing in outfits shaped like nuclear explosions, or families camping near test sites, cheering as shockwaves rattle their picnic baskets. This isn't science fiction. It's real, raw, and equal parts absurd and unsettling spoken. It's real. We'll unpack how America was sold the nuclear age as a shiny vision of the future, brushing off risks like radiation as if it were mere inconveniences. Close your eyes and imagine it's 1953. Picture yourself cruising into Las Vegas, the desert air warm against your skin, the Strip glowing like a fever dream of neon and ambition. The city hums with life. Slot machines jingle, showgirls shimmy, and crooners like Dean Martin serenading to packed lounges. But you're not here for the usual Vegas thrills. You're chasing something bigger, something that'll make your friends back home drop their jaws when you tell them about it. You're here to watch a nuclear bomb go off. Welcome to the surreal. It's electrifying reality show world of nuclear tourism, where mushroom clouds were the ultimate showstopper. From 1956 to 1958, the Nevada test site, a sprawling patch of desert just 65 miles northwest of Las Vegas, was the stage for over 100 atmospheric nuclear tests. These weren't quiet experiments tucked away in secret labs. The U.S. government was detonating bombs above ground, sending fireballs into the sky, and clouds mushrooming, curling toward the heavens. And they didn't keep it under wraps. Instead, they saw a chance to turn it into a spectacle. Why hide the power of the atom's power when you could sell tickets to the show? Las Vegas, ever the opportunist, jumped on board, transforming itself into the gateway to the atomic age. You check into the Desert Inn, a palace of mid-century glamour with its glittering chandeliers and plush suites. The bellhop hands you your room key and a glossy pamphlet, but it's not for a magic show or an all-you-can-eat buffet. It's a schedule of upcoming nuclear tests, complete with viewing tips and a map to the hotel's best vantage points for viewing spots. Don't miss the 7 a.m. blast tomorrow. It reads, cheerfully, bring sunglasses and a camera. Sunglasses? Oh, because a 20-kiloton nuclear explosion can outshine the desert sun, and you'll want to see every second of it without squinting. The vibe is pure 1950s bravado. Nuclear power is the future, and you're getting a VIP pass to witness it firsthand. You decide to head to the hotel Sky Room, a rooftop lounge with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a front-row seat to the desert. The place is already buzzing with energy. Tourist families are decked out in crisp summer outfits, businessmen loosening their ties, couples sharing martinis, even a few kids chasing each other around the tables, oblivious to the adults' excitement. Waiters in crisp white jackets weave through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne flutes and shrimp cocktails. The air smells of perfume, cigarette smoke, and anticipation, like the moments before a big concert kicks off. Outside, the sunset sees dipping low, painting the sky in shades of coral and lavender, but all eyes are locked on the horizon, where the real show is about to begin. You grab a spot by the window, sipping a cocktail as the crowd's chatter grows louder. A woman in a polka-dot dress next to you adjusts her cat-eye sunglasses, whispering to her husband about how they missed the last one. A group of college kids nearby are placing bets, not on blackjack, but on how tall the mushroom cloud will be. A loudspeaker crackles to life, cutting through the noise. Ladies and gentlemen, the test will commence in 10 minutes. The room goes quiet, a ripple of excitement passing through like electricity. You lean forward, heart pounding, as the countdown begins. Everyone holds their breath, eyes glued to the desert. Then, boom! A flash so blinding it feels like the sky itself caught fire. For a split second, the world is pure white, like someone flipped a cosmic light switch. Then a mushroom cloud takes shape, a massive, swirling tower of smoke and fury rising into the stratosphere. It's mesmerizing, almost otherworldly, like a painting of destruction brought to life. The crowd erupts, gasps turning to cheers, clapping and whistling as if they're at a baseball game. Did you see that? A guy in a Hawaiian shirt shouts, his voice thick with awe. People whip out Polaroid cameras, frantically snapping photos of the cloud as it drifts upward, its edges glowing in the twilight like a surreal sunset. You start counting the seconds, 30, 40, maybe 50, waiting for the shockwave. It comes rolling in a low, rumbling growl that shakes the rooftop and sends a shiver through your martini glass. It's not enough to knock you over, but it's enough to make your pulse race like a roller coaster drop. That's the stuff. A woman in a polka dot dress laughs, raising her drink in a toast. The party kicks into high gear, with jazz pouring from the speakers and waiters circling with fresh trays of drinks like nothing happened. Someone starts a chant, A-bomb, A-bomb, and the crowd joins in, caught up in the fever of the moment. Let's take a moment to soak this in. You're on vacation, maybe with your kids in tow, and you're cheering for a nuclear explosion. It's the kind of thing that sounds like a sci-fi movie gone wrong. But this was real life in 1950s Vegas. The Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce was the genius, or maybe the villain, behind this atomic circus. They printed calendars with test schedules, so tourists could plan their trips around the detonations. Come for the slots, stay for the bombs, might as well have been their slogan. Hotels leaned hard into the theme, offering bomb breakfasts, where you'd munch on bacon and eggs while watching the desert light up like a second sunrise. The Flamingo advertised Skyroom specials, with champagne and prime views of the blasts. Some places even hosted dawn bomb parties, kicking off at 4 a.m. for early morning tests. Picture stumbling out of bed, still in your pajamas, to join a crowd of strangers in bathrobes, all toasting to the end of the world. The city went all in on the atomic aesthetic. Gift shops sold postcards with mushroom clouds captioned, "Wish you were here," or "Greetings from the atomic frontier." Diners served atomic burgers, probably just regular burgers with a side of hype, and bakeries offered mushroom cloud cupcakes, complete with swirls of frosting shaped like, well, you guessed it. Local TV stations broadcast test footage, sometimes set to upbeat jazz or big band tunes, turning doomsday into primetime entertainment. One station even ran a segment called Atomic Highlights, recapping the week's best blasts like they were sports plays. It was peak Vegas, part showbiz, part insanity, all wrapped in a shiny, radioactive bow. The frenzy didn't stop at the hotels. Tourists could buy atomic souvenirs, like keychains shaped like bombs or t-shirts with slogans like, "I survived the Nevada test site." Spoiler, not everyone did, but we'll get to that. Bars handed out atomic cocktail menus with drinks like the Nuclear Fizz, a fizzy concoction that glowed under blacklight, purely for effect, of course. Even the city's famous showgirls got in on the act, performing in atomic-themed reviews with costumes that sparkled like fallout. One casino, the Sands, hosted a Miss Atomic Energy pageant, a warm-up for the infamous Miss Atomic Bomb, where local beauties strutted their stuff while a band played a song called the Atomic Bounce. It was just a spectacle. It was a cultural phenomenon, a moment when Vegas turned the end of the world into a brand. Why do people buy into this? Because in the 1950s, nuclear power was a miracle. It was sold as the key to a utopian future, clean energy, space travel, maybe even world peace. The government and media painted the atom as a friendly giant, and the tests were proof of America's might in the Cold War. Every blast was a message to the Soviets. We've got this. Radiation, fallout, those were minor details, brushed off with assurances like, it's perfectly safe. The Nevada test site was far enough away, 65 miles away, give or take, that tourists didn't feel the heat or hear the blast itself, just the delayed rumble of the shockwave. And if a little radioactive dust drifted into town on the desert wind, well, nobody talked about it had. The government said it was fine, and Vegas wasn't about to argue with a gold mine. The crowds couldn't get enough. People drove in from all over, California, Texas, even as far as New York, from across the country to catch a glimpse of a nuclear blast in action. They'd book rooms weeks in advance, sometimes choosing hotels based on which ones had the best rooftop views. Families posed for photos with the desert in the background, hoping to frame a shot with a mushroom cloud like it was a Grand Canyon sunset. Couples planned their honeymoons around the test schedule, because nothing screams romance like a 20-kiloton explosion, right? It was the ultimate status symbol, a story to tell at cocktail parties back home. Oh, you went to the beach? Well, I went to Vegas and saw the future. Some tourists even brought their own binoculars, as if they could zoom in on the fireball itself. Others placed bets in the casinos, not on cards or dice, but on how high tall the cloud would grow or how loud the rumble shockwave would be. Only in Vegas, folks, the obsession wasn't just about the blasts themselves. It was about being part of history. The 1950s were a time of big dreams and bigger risks, and nuclear power was the ultimate symbol of both. People saw these tests as a glimpse of the future, a chance to witness humanity's mastery over the atom. Newspapers ran glowing articles about the atomic age, with headlines like Nevada lights the way or Vegas welcomes the new dawn. Scientists in white coats were quoted saying things like, "This is the energy that will power our cities." Never mind that these were bombs, not power plants. The public ate it up, packing their suitcases and heading to Vegas for a front row seat to the apocalypse. But let's zoom out for a second and get real. This whole setup is wild, right? Imagine telling your friend someone today, "Yeah, I'm heading to Vegas to watch a nuke go off. Want to come?" They'd think you'd lost your mind. Yet thousands of people, grandmas, parents, kids with lollipops, did exactly that, treating it the test like a 4th of July fireworks show, except with stakes higher than a bad sunburn. There's something darkly funny about it. Grandmas in sundresses, kids with lollipops, all clapping for a weapon that could end the world. It's absurd, but it's also a snapshot of a time when optimism and ignorance collided head-on. The 1950s were all about dreaming big, and if that meant throwing a party for the atom, why not? Of course, there's a darker shadow hanging over this neon-lit story. Those tests weren't as safe as the brochures claimed. Fallout didn't just stay neatly contained in the desert. It drifted over towns, fell on farms, and even snuck into Vegas itself. Desert winds could carry radioactive particles far and wide, sometimes hundreds of miles, and settling on fields, homes, even people's laundry lines. Scientists later estimated that some of these blasts exposed thousands of people to low-level radiation, which could have contributed to health issues years down the line, cancers, leukemias, you name it. But in the 1950s, nobody talked about it. The government downplayed the risks, issuing statements like, "no cause for alarm," or "negligible exposure." Vegas officials, dazzled by dollar signs, weren't about to ask questions. The tourists kept coming, the hotels kept booking rooms, and the bombs kept booming. It was a bizarre cocktail of American bravado, Cold War paranoia, and capitalist hustle, shaken and stirred. A party thrown on the edge of oblivion. It's 1955, and you're standing in the heart of Las Vegas, where the air smells of hairspray, cigarette smoke, and pure, unfiltered ambition. The neon lights of the Strip are blazing, but tonight, the real spotlight isn't on a casino stage or a crooner's microphone. It's on a beauty pageant unlike any other. Welcome to the surreal, glitzy, and downright bizarre world of Miss Atomic Bomb, where the glamour of showgirls meets the raw power of the atom in a spectacle that could only happen in Vegas. This isn't just a contest for a sparkly crown. It's a celebration of the nuclear age, wrapped in sequins and topped with a mushroom cloud. Picture the scene. You're in the packed showroom of the Sands Hotel, the kind of place where the cocktails are strong, the music is loud, and the crowd is buzzing with excitement. The stage is draped in red velvet, and a massive banner overhead screams, "Miss Atomic Bomb, 1955," in bold, glowing letters. The audience, tourists in loud Hawaiian shirts, locals in sharp suits, and a few military types fresh from the Nevada test site, leans forward in their seats. A big band orchestra strikes up a jazzy tune, something with a swing that feels like it's trying to keep up with the city's pulse. The MC, a slick guy with a pencil mustache and a voice like melted butter, steps up to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he croons, "tonight, we crown the queen of the atomic age. Now, let's set the stage for why this even exists." In the 1950s, Las Vegas was riding high on its nuclear tourism boom. The Nevada test site, just 65 miles away, was churning out mushroom clouds like clockwork, and the city had turned those explosions into a marketing goldmine. Hotels hosted bomb-watching parties, bars slung atomic cocktails, and every gift shop sold postcard with clouds captioned, "Boom from Vegas." But the Chamber of Commerce wanted to take it up a notch. How do you make nuclear bombs even sexier? Easy. Pair them with beauty queens. Enter the Miss Atomic Bomb contest, a publicity stunt that blended the allure of pin-up glamour with the raw, terrifying power of the atom. It was absurd, it was audacious, and it was peak 1950s Vegas. The contestants start to sashay onto the stage, and you can't help but do a double take. These aren't your typical pageant gowns. One woman, a brunette with a megawatt smile, is wearing a swimsuit topped with a fluffy, white headpiece shaped like a mushroom cloud. Yes, an actual mushroom cloud, complete with cotton batting to mimic the smoke. Another contestant, a redhead in a glittering silver dress, has a sash that reads, "Atomic Energy," in rhinestones. A third struts out in a bikini with a tiny hand-painted bomb dangling from her waist like a charm bracelet. The crowd eats it up, whistling and clapping as each woman strikes a pose. Their outfit's a bizarre love letter to the nuclear age. It's like someone took a beauty pageant, tossed it into a blender with a sci-fi flick, and hit puree. The MC keeps the energy high, cracking jokes that land somewhere between cheesy and unhinged. "This gal's smile is brighter than a 20-kiloton blast," he says, gesturing to a contestant who's twirling a baton painted with red and yellow flames. And here's Miss Fallout, ready to radiate charm. The audience roars, caught up in the absurdity of it all. You glance around and see tourists snapping photos, some scribbling notes for their Vegas stories to tell back home. A couple of guys in the front row are placing bets, not on who'll win, but on which costume will get the loudest cheer. It's a circus, and everyone's bought a ticket. Let's zoom in on one contestant, a woman named Lee Merlin, who became the poster child for this whole phenomenon. Lee, a local showgirl with a knack for stealing the spotlight, steps out in what would become an iconic outfit. Her swimsuit is sleek and black, but the real star is the headpiece, a massive, fluffy cloud of cotton and tulle, meticulously crafted to look like a mushroom cloud mid-bloom. She poses with one hand on her hip, the other raised as if she's summoning the explosion herself. The photographer from the Las Vegas News Bureau is there, snapping away, and the resulting image, Lee grinning against a desert backdrop, her cloud practically glowing, will become the defining shot of Miss Atomic Bomb. It's plastered on postcards, newspapers, even t-shirts sold to tourists who want a piece of the atomic craze to take home. But this pageant isn't just about looks. It's a full-on production. The contestants don't just parade around. They perform. One sings a jazzy number called Atomic Love, with lyrics about a spark that ignites the heart like a bomb in the night. Another does a dance routine, twirling sparklers that mimic the flash of a detonation. There's even a skit where two contestants act out a scientist and showgirl romance, complete with fake lab coats and a cardboard bomb prop that gets a standing ovation. The crowd loves every second, shouting encouragement and tossing flowers onto the stage. It's less a beauty contest and more a theatrical ode to the atom, with a heavy dose of Vegas razzle-dazzle. Now, let's pause and reflect on this. Can you imagine the pitch meeting for this idea? Some guy in a suit, probably chain-smoking, saying, "Hear me out. We take beautiful women, dress them up like nuclear explosions, and make it a pageant. It'll sell." And somehow, everyone nodded along. It's the kind of thing that sounds like a fever dream today, but in 1950s Vegas, it made perfect sense. The city was built on excess. Why not extend that to the most powerful weapon in history? The atom was sexy, futuristic, and quintessentially American, and pairing it with beauty queens was just good business. The contests weren't even one-offs. Variations like Miss Atomic Energy or Queen of the Neutron popped up throughout the decade, each one trying to outdo the last in sheer audacity. The marketing machine behind Miss Atomic Bomb was relentless. The Las Vegas News Bureau sent those photos of Lee Merlin and her mushroom cloud headpiece to newspapers across the country, and they ate it up. Headlines screamed, "Vegas crowns atomic beauty," and "Bombshell meets bomb." Magazines ran features on the pageant, with captions like, "She's got the power to light up the desert." The images were everywhere, on billboards, in travel brochures, even on cocktail napkins in local bars. It wasn't just about crowning a winner. It was about branding Vegas as the epicenter of the atomic age. And it worked. Tourists flooded the city, hoping to catch a glimpse of a real blast and a beauty queen in one trip. Hotels started offering pageant packages, bundling show tickets with rooftop bomb viewing passes. It was a match made in marketing heaven. But let's get real for a second. There's something both hilarious and unsettling about this whole spectacle. These women were posing as living embodiments of a weapon that could annihilate cities. The same bombs that leveled Hiroshima and Nagasaki were being celebrated with sequins and smiles. It's a stark reminder of how the 1950s framed nuclear power as a double-edged sword, terrifying yet thrilling, destructive yet dazzling. Nobody talked about the risks, radiation, fallout, the long-term health effects. The government had everyone convinced that the tests were safe, and Vegas was happy to play along. Why spoil the party with talk of Geiger counters? The contestants, for their part, seemed to embrace the madness. Many were local showgirls or aspiring actresses, already used to Vegas's over-the-top vibe. For them, Miss Atomic Bomb was a chance to shine, maybe even land a modeling gig or a spot in a Hollywood flick. Some saw it as patriotic, a way to support America's Cold War swagger. Others just wanted the prize money, often a modest cash sum, a gift certificate to a local boutique, or, in one case, a year's supply of atomic hair products, whatever that meant. But you can't help but wonder what they thought privately. Did they giggle at the absurdity of it all? Or did they buy into the atomic dream, believing they were part of something bigger? The audience didn't overthink it. They were there for the show, and Vegas delivered. The pageant wasn't just a one-night event. It was part of a larger atomic culture that seeped into every corner of the city. Nightclubs hosted atomic nights, with dancers performing under blacklights to create a radioactive glow. Bars served drinks with names like Meltdown Martini or Gamma Ray Glow, often garnished with glowing cocktail sticks for effect. Even wedding chapels got in on the act, offering atomic vows packages where couples could tie the knot with a mushroom cloud in the background. Because nothing says forever like a nuclear blast. There's a photo from one of these pageants that captures the vibe perfectly. A line of contestants in their cloud-shaped headpieces, standing in front of a massive cutout of a bomb labeled, "Made in USA." They're smiling, hands on hips, as if they're selling toothpaste or convertibles. The crowd in the background is a mix of wide-eyed tourists and jaded locals, all caught up in the moment. It's a snapshot of a time when America was so confident in its power that it could turn a weapon of mass destruction into a photo op. You can't help but laugh at the sheer audacity, even as you cringe at the implications. But the Miss Atomic Bomb phenomenon wasn't without its critics, even back then. A few newspaper columnists called it tasteless, pointing out the disconnect between glamour and destruction. One editorial in a California paper sniffed, "Turning bombs into beauty contests is a new low, even for Vegas." But those voices were drowned out by the hype. The pageants kept going, fueled by the city's relentless drive to turn everything into a spectacle. And the tourists? They loved it. They'd line up for autographs from the winners, buy Miss Atomic Bomb souvenir pins, and write home about the unforgettable experience. The Las Vegas Strip is a distant memory, its neon glow replaced by the endless expanse of desert, sagebrush, cacti, and a sky so wide it feels like it could swallow you whole. You're not out here for a quiet hike or a stargazing retreat. No, you and your family are headed to a spot just outside the Nevada test site, where the U.S. government is about to detonate a nuclear bomb. Welcome to the wild, reckless world of camping near the blast zone, where Americans turn the most destructive weapon in history into a spectator sport, complete with picnic baskets and folding chairs. Picture this. You pull up to a makeshift campsite a few miles from the test site's perimeter, where a ragtag crowd has already gathered. It's a motley crew, families with kids running wild, young couples in love with the thrill, and grizzled locals who've seen one too many mushroom clouds to be impressed. Tents are pitched haphazardly, some with American flags flapping in the breeze. Coolers are stuffed with soda pop, sandwiches, and maybe a few beers for the grown-ups. Someone's got a portable radio blaring Elvis Presley, while a group of teenagers tosses a frisbee, laughing as the desert wind kicks up dust. It's like a 4th of July picnic, except instead of fireworks, you're waiting for a 30-kiloton explosion to light up the morning. You unfold a lawn chair, settle in next to your neighbor, a guy in a cowboy hat who's already cracking open a can of Pabst, and scan the horizon. The Nevada test site, a sprawling 1,350 square mile chunk of desert, is just beyond a low ridge, marked by a chain-link fence and a few stern-looking military signs that read, "Restricted Area." But out here, just outside the official boundary, it's a free-for-all. No tickets, no reservations, just a front-row seat to the atomic age. Your kids are sprawled on a blanket, munching on potato chips, and arguing over who gets the binoculars. "When's it gonna blow?" your youngest asks, kicking at a pebble. You check your watch. Any minute now. The vibe is equal parts excitement and absurdity. Someone's passing around a thermos of coffee, while a mom nearby hands out homemade cookies shaped like little bombs, complete with red licorice fuses. A guy with a thick Brooklyn accent is telling anyone who'll listen about the last test he saw. "The ground shook so hard, my beer fell over." The crowd chuckles, unfazed. There's no talk of radiation or fallout, no whispers of danger. The government has assured everyone it's safe, and in the 1950s, that's good enough. Besides, who has time to worry when you're tailgating for a nuclear blast? A military jeep rolls by, kicking up dust, and a soldier with a megaphone announces, "Test in 5 minutes. Stay behind the designated line." The line is just a rope staked into the sand, maybe 10 miles from ground zero, close enough to feel the show, but far enough, supposedly, to keep you safe. You squint toward the test site, where a tall metal tower looms in the distance, a bomb perched on top like a deadly Christmas star. The crowd hushes, The radio gets turned down, and all eyes lock on that tower. Your heart's pounding now, not from fear, but from the sheer thrill of it. 3. Someone counts aloud, and then, boom, the desert explodes in light. The flash is blinding, like God himself flipped on a spotlight. You instinctively shield your eyes, even with sunglasses, as the fireball blooms, a swirling mass of orange and red that seems to pulse with its own life. Seconds later, the mushroom cloud rises, massive and majestic, twisting into the sky like a living thing. The crowd erupts, cheers, gasps, even a few whistles. "Look at that thing," your neighbor yells, slapping his knee. Your kids are jumping up and down, pointing as the cloud grows taller, its edges glowing in the morning sun. You start counting 30 seconds, 40, 50, until the shockwave hits a deep, rolling whump that shakes the ground and sends a gust of warm air across the campsite. Sand stings your face and your coffee sloshes, but you're grinning like an idiot because, well, how often do you get to feel the earth move like that? Let's hit pause and take this in. You're out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by strangers, eating sandwiches and watching a nuclear bomb go off. It's the kind of thing that sounds like a prank, but in the 1950s, this was just another weekend adventure. The Nevada test site was a magnet for thrill seekers, families, and anyone curious enough to drive out and see the show. Between 1951 and 1958, over 100 atmospheric tests lit up the desert, and while Las Vegas hotels cashed in with their rooftop parties, the real diehards wanted to get closer, way closer. These weren't official events. No bleachers, no ushers, just word-of-mouth gatherings that spread like wildfire. Test next Saturday, someone would say at a diner, and by dawn, dozens of cars would be parked along the desert roads, tailgates down, blankets spread, all waiting for the Big Bang. The campers weren't just locals. People drove from California, Arizona, even as far as Utah, lugging their tents and coolers for a chance to see history in action. Some were veterans of the Vegas scene, fresh from a night at the casinos, chasing the ultimate adrenaline rush. Others were families looking for a cheap outing. After all, it didn't cost a dime to park in the desert and watch. The tests were public knowledge, with schedules published in newspapers and on radio, courtesy of the Atomic Energy Commission. Bring the whole family. One flyer chirped, as if you were going to a county fair. And people did. You'd see station wagons packed with kids, dogs, and picnic baskets, parents setting up camp like they were in a national park, not a nuclear-proving ground. The atmosphere was almost festive. Someone would always bring a guitar, strumming "This Land Is Your Land," while the crowd waited. Kids played tag, dodging between tents, while adults swapped stories about past tests. The one in 52 was bigger, a grizzled guy might say, pointing to a faded Polaroid of a cloud he kept in his wallet. Some folks got creative, bringing homemade signs that read, "Welcome, A-Bomb," or "Nevada's Biggest Show." A few enterprising types even set up impromptu lemonade stands, selling cups for a nickel to parched campers. It was less like a military exercise and more like a block party, with the bomb as the guest of honor. But let's talk logistics for a second. These weren't exactly safe, sanctioned events. The Nevada test site was a restricted zone, patrolled by military police, but the surrounding desert was public land, and nobody could stop you from setting up camp just outside the fence. The Atomic Energy Commission set safe zones based on wind patterns and blast yield, but these were more guesswork than science. Sometimes, campers got closer than intended, maybe 5 or 6 miles from ground zero, because nobody was checking IDs or measuring distances. You just drive until you hit a crowd, park, and wait. The military didn't encourage it, but they didn't stop it either. As long as you stayed behind the rope, you were golden. Or so they said. The bombs themselves were a spectacle. Some were dropped from planes, others detonated on towers, or even underground, though the above-ground blasts were the crowd pleasers. The flash came first, so bright it could burn your retinas if you weren't careful. Then the fireball, a roiling mass of heat that could melt sand into glass. The mushroom cloud was the grand finale, towering thousands of feet, its shape burned into pop culture forever. Campers would ooh and ah, snapping photos with their brownies or sketching the cloud in notebooks. When a shockwave hit, anywhere from 20 seconds to a minute later, depending on your distance, it was like a punch to the chest, a visceral reminder of the bomb's power. People would laugh, scream, even dance as the ground trembled, treating it like a roller coaster ride. There's a story from one of these tests, Operation Teapot in 1955, that captures the vibe. A group of campers, about 50 strong, set up near a spot called Frenchman Flat. They'd heard about a big one, a 43-kiloton monster called Turk. By dawn, the desert was alive with activity. Families grilling hot dogs, kids playing catch, even a couple of guys flying a kite shaped like a bomb. When the blast went off, the crowd went wild, shouting and clapping as the cloud rose. But the shockwave was stronger than expected, knocking over tents and flipping a few lawn chairs. Nobody was hurt, but one guy reportedly stood up, dusted off his hat, and yelled, "Now that's what I call a wake-up call." The story made the local papers, with a headline that read, "Desert Daredevils Defy the Bomb." But here's where the laughter fades. These campers weren't just risking a spilled drink. They were exposing themselves, and their kids, to fallout. The government swore the tests were safe, but safe was a loose term in the 1950s. Winds could carry radioactive particles hundreds of miles, dusting campsites, towns, even Las Vegas itself. Scientists later estimated that some tests released enough radiation to cause health problems years down the line. Cancers, thyroid issues, you name it. But back then, the Atomic Energy Commission handed out pamphlets saying things like fallout dissipates quickly, or no cause for concern. Campers trusted them, packing their kids into the car without a second thought. It's hard to imagine now, but the 1950s were a time of blind faith in authority, especially when it came with a side of spectacle. The campers themselves were a mix of naive and thrill-seeking. Some were locals who saw the tests as just another part of desert life, like a monsoon or a sunset. Others were tourists chasing the ultimate Vegas experience, because watching from a hotel rooftop wasn't close enough. A few were outright daredevils, bragging about how they crept past the rope to get a better view. One guy, a mechanic from Reno, was quoted in a 1953 newspaper saying, "I've seen 6 blasts now, and I ain't glowing yet." He brought his wife and 3 kids each time, treating it like a family tradition. Another camper, a schoolteacher from California, wrote a letter to her local paper describing the experience. "It's like seeing the hand of God, only louder." The media didn't help. Newspapers ran glowing stories about the desert picnics, with photos of smiling families and captions like "Fun under the mushroom cloud." Radio stations broadcast live updates from the test site, complete with play-by-play commentary, like it was a football game. "And there goes, folks, a beauty of a blast," one DJ crowed during a 1952 test. The coverage made it sound like a must-see event, and for many, it was. Some campers kept scrapbooks, pasting in photos, newspaper clippings, even bits of desert sand they swore had been touched by the bomb. It was a badge of honor, proof you'd been part of something bigger than yourself. But not everyone was so carefree. A few voices, mostly scientists and small-town doctors, raised concerns about the risks. One physician in St. George, Utah, about 100 miles from the test site, noticed a spike in respiratory issues after a 1953 test. He wrote to the Atomic Energy Commission, asking if fallout could be to blame. The response? A polite letter assuring him that all precautions were taken. Meanwhile, ranchers in the area started reporting sick livestock, cows losing hair, sheep dying mysteriously. The government dismissed it as coincidence, but the whispers grew. Still, the campers kept coming, drawn by the allure of the unknown. Let's step back and process this. You're out in the desert, eating a hot dog, while a nuclear bomb goes off a few miles away. Your kids are playing in the sand, and you're toasting to the future with a warm beer. It's equal parts hilarious and horrifying, like a scene from a dystopian comedy. But in the 1950s, this was normal. The atom was America's golden child, and the tests were a chance to flex that power. Nobody wanted to hear about fallout or long-term risks, not when there was a show to enjoy. Welcome to the audacious, high-risk world of nuclear explosions in film and television, where Hollywood turned the atom's raw power into box office magic, often at a price nobody anticipated. You're a grip on the set of The Conqueror, a big-budget epic starring John Wayne as Genghis Khan. Yes, really. The script calls for sweeping desert vistas, and the location scouts have picked a spot near St. George, Utah, about 100 miles from the Nevada test site. The ground is powdery with red dust, and the crew's been warned to wear sunglasses for today's shoot. Not for the sun, but for the flash of a 30-kiloton bomb scheduled to go off at dawn. The director, Dick Powell, is pacing nervously, muttering about getting the shot. The Atomic Energy Commission has given the green light, assuring everyone it's safe to film so close to the blast zone. You adjust a light reflector, squinting toward the test site, and wonder if this is the coolest, or craziest, gig you've ever worked. The crew's been prepped for weeks. The government provided a liaison, a stern-faced officer who handed out pamphlets with titles like Filming Near Atomic Tests, Safety Guidelines. The rules are simple. Stay behind the designated line, wear protective goggles during the blast, and don't touch the sand afterward. Easy enough, right? But as the countdown begins, you feel a knot in your stomach. The horizon lights up with a flash, so bright it turns night into day, followed by a fireball that seems to boil the sky. The mushroom cloud rises, massive and menacing, its edges curling like a living storm. The crew cheers, the cameras roll, and John Wayne, in full Mongol warrior getup, stares at the cloud like it's just another prop. Hell of a show, he drawls, lighting his cigarette. This wasn't a one-off. In the 1950s, Hollywood saw the Nevada test site as a treasure trove of spectacle. Between 1951 and 1958, the U.S. conducted over 100 atmospheric nuclear tests, and filmmakers flocked to the desert to capture the real thing. Why fake an explosion with special effects when you could film the genuine article? The blasts were free, dramatic, and guaranteed to draw crowds. Studios like RKO and Warner Brothers sent crews to the test site, banking on the atomic allure to sell tickets. Documentaries, newsreels, and even feature films used the bombs as backdrops, turning the apocalypse into entertainment. It was a marriage of Cold War bravado and Hollywood hustle, and for a while, it seemed like a match made in heaven. Let's zoom in on The Conqueror, because it's the poster child for this reckless era. The film was a pet project of Howard Hughes, the eccentric billionaire who wanted to make an epic to rival Ben-Hur. The story was a stretch. John Wayne as Genghis Khan, complete with a glued-on mustache and questionable accent. But the real gamble was the location. The crew spent weeks filming in Snow Canyon, a stunning red rock valley near St. George, Utah. It was picturesque, sure, but it was also downwind from the Nevada test site, where Operation Upshot Knothole had just unleashed a series of blasts in 1953. The desert was still dusted with radioactive fallout, but nobody sounded the alarm. The Atomic Energy Commission insisted the area was safe, and Hughes, ever the risk-taker, trusted them. The shoot was grueling. The crew worked 12-hour days in 100-degree heat, kicking up clouds of that powdery red dust with every step. Actors like Susan Hayward and Pedro Armendariz galloped through the sand on horseback, while grips hauled equipment through dunes that shimmered with an eerie, almost metallic sheen. Between takes, the cast and crew ate lunch on the ground, their sandwiches sprinkled with whatever the wind carried. Nobody thought twice about it. After all, the government said it was fine. The bomb footage was the cherry on top. A sequence where the Mongol army charges across the desert, silhouetted against a real mushroom cloud from a test called Harry, later nicknamed Dirty Harry for its heavy fallout. The shot was breathtaking, and early screenings had audiences gasping. But what cost? Fast forward a few decades, and The Conqueror became infamous for a darker reason. By the 1980s, nearly half the cast and crew, 91 out of 220 people, had been diagnosed with cancer. John Wayne died of stomach cancer in 1979. Susan Hayward succumbed to brain cancer in 1975. Dick Powell and Pedro Armendariz also died of cancer-related illnesses. Even Howard Hughes, who rarely visited the set, later battled health issues, some linked to radiation exposure. Scientists and historians pointed to the fallout from those 1953 tests, which blanketed the region with radioactive particles. The desert wasn't just dusty, it was deadly. The government denied any connection, but the numbers were hard to ignore. A 1980 report estimated that the Dirty Harry test alone exposed nearby communities to dangerous levels of radiation, and the Conqueror crew was right in the thick of it. But the Conqueror was just one piece of the puzzle. Hollywood's nuclear obsession ran deep. Newsreels from the era, like those produced by PATH and Universal, featured dramatic footage of test explosions, narrated with booming voices that called the bombs America's shield of strength. Documentaries like Operation Crossroads, 1946, and The House in the Middle, 1954, used real blast footage to sell the public on the wonders of the atomic age. The latter, a bizarre civil defense film, showed how a well-kept house could supposedly survive a nuclear blast better than a messy one, complete with footage of dummy homes being incinerated at the test site. It was propaganda dressed up as entertainment, and audiences ate it up. Feature films got in on the act too. Sci-fi flicks like them, 1954, and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, 1953, didn't use real blasts but were inspired by the test site's eerie aura, spinning tales of giant ants and dinosaurs spawned by radiation. Meanwhile, B-movies like The Atomic Kid, 1954, played the test for laughs, with Mickey Rooney stumbling into a blast zone and gaining superpowers, because sure, why not? The films leaned into the public's fascination with the atom, blending fear and awe into a potent cocktail. Theaters advertised these movies with posters of mushroom clouds and taglines like, "See the power that tamed the desert." It was a gold rush, and Hollywood was panning for box office gold. Television jumped on the bandwagon too. Networks like CBS and NBC aired live broadcasts of test explosions, turning them into must-see TV. In 1952, CBS aired a special called Operation Tumbler Snapper, with reporters stationed miles from the blast, describing the fireball in real time as cameras rolled. "It's a sight to behold, folks," one announcer gushed, as if he were covering a parade. Families gathered around their black and white TVs, kids wide-eyed, parents nodding approvingly at America's might. Some stations even added jazzy soundtracks to the footage because nothing says nuclear explosion like a saxophone riff. It was surreal, but it fit the era's vibe. The atom was a star, and TV was its stage. The crews who filmed these blasts were a mix of fearless and foolhardy. Many were young, eager to break into Hollywood, and saw the test site as a ticket to the big leagues. They'd set up cameras as close as the military allowed, sometimes just 5 miles from ground zero, protected only by flimsy goggles and a vague promise of safety. One cameraman, interviewed years later, recalled crouching behind a sandbag barrier during a 1955 test. "The ground shook like an earthquake," he said. "We were laughing, but I think we were scared too." Another crew member, a sound tech, described how the blast's roar overwhelmed their equipment, blowing out microphones and leaving them with nothing but static. "We didn't care," he shrugged. "We got the shot." The Atomic Energy Commission played a big role, coordinating with studios to ensure safe filming. They provide schedules, safety briefings, and even military escorts to guide crews to the best vantage points. In return, the government got free publicity, films and newsreels that glorified the tests and reassured the public that the atom was under control. It was a symbiotic relationship. Hollywood got its spectacle, and the government got a propaganda machine. One AEC official was quoted saying, "The more people see these tests, the less they'll fear them." And for a while it worked. Audiences left theaters buzzing about the awesome power they'd seen, not the invisible fallout that might follow. But the risks were real, even if nobody wanted to admit it. Crews often worked in areas contaminated by recent tests, kicking up dust that carried radioactive particles. Some reported strange symptoms after shoots: nausea, headaches, hair loss. But doctors brushed it off as heat stroke or nerves. The government's safety guidelines were laughably lax by today's standards. One memo advised filmmakers to rinse equipment with water to remove fallout, as if it were mud. Another suggested avoiding prolonged exposure, without specifying what prolonged meant. Meanwhile, the AEC was conducting its own studies on fallout, but the results were classified, leaving crews in the dark. There's a haunting anecdote from a 1953 test, Operation Upshot Knotholes Grable, where a newsreel crew set up just 6 miles from the blast. They'd been promised a small explosion, but Grable was a 15-kiloton beast, complete with a cannon-fired warhead that shook the desert like a thunderclap. The crew got their footage, a stunning sequence of the fireball and cloud, but several members later developed skin lesions and respiratory issues. One cameraman, who died of leukemia in the 1970s, told his family, "I should have known something was up when the sand glowed." The government never acknowledged a link, but the story lingered in Hollywood circles, a whisper of what might have been. The public, meanwhile, was oblivious. They flocked to theaters, mesmerized by the grainy black and white footage of mushroom clouds. Kids begged their parents to take them to Vegas to see the real thing, inspired by the films they'd seen. Adults debated the science of the house in the middle of dinner parties, nodding sagely about the importance of a tidy lawn in the face of nuclear annihilation. It was a strange mix of awe and denial, fueled by a culture that saw the atom as both savior and showstopper. Nobody wanted to talk about the risks, not when the movies were so thrilling. You're a young soldier, barely out of basic training, your olive drab uniform stiff with starch, and your helmet strapped tight. Around you, hundreds of other troops huddle in similar trenches, their faces tense under the dim glow of a rising sun. The Nevada test site stretches out before you, a barren expanse of dust and scrub, with a 100-foot steel tower looming in the distance, crowned by a nuclear bomb. This isn't a battle, but it feels like one. You've been told it's a training exercise, but the truth is stark. You're here as a human guinea pig, part of a military experiment to see how soldiers fare in the shadow of an atomic blast. Welcome to the grim, unsettling world of soldiers as test subjects, where the U.S. Army sent its own to face the atom's wrath. Picture the scene. You're gripping your rifle, trying to ignore the sweat trickling down your back despite the morning chill. Your sergeant, a grizzled veteran with a voice like gravel, barks orders, "Keep your heads down until the all clear." A few yards away, a private mutters a prayer, while another cracks a nervous joke about glowing in the dark. The trenches, hastily dug, barely 4 feet deep, offer little comfort. You're about 5 miles from ground zero, close enough to feel the bomb's fury, but, supposedly, far enough to survive. The Atomic Energy Commission, AEC, has briefed your unit. The test, part of Operation Tumbler Snapper, will simulate a nuclear battlefield, teaching you to fight through an atomic attack. But the Geiger counters strapped to some officers' belts tell a different story. This isn't just training. It's a gamble with your life. The countdown begins, crackling over a loudspeaker. 10. Your heart pounds, drowning out the desert's silence. At 0, the world erupts. A flash sears your vision, so bright it burns through your closed eyelids, turning the trench walls white. The heat hits next, a wave that feels like standing too close to a furnace. Then the shock wave, a bone-rattling boom that slams the ground, sending dirt cascading over you like a wave. You press yourself deeper into the trench, ears ringing, as the mushroom cloud rises, a towering colossus of smoke and fire that seems to mock your fragile cover. Seconds stretch into eternity until the all-clear whistle blows. You scramble out, blinking against the dust, and see the cloud still climbing, its edges glowing against the dawn sky. This wasn't a one-time stunt. From 1945 to 1962, the U.S. military exposed over 200,000 soldiers, sailors, and airmen to nuclear tests, primarily at the Nevada Test Site and Pacific Proving Grounds. These atomic maneuvers were designed to prepare troops for nuclear warfare, but they doubled as experiments to study human exposure to radiation. The Pentagon wanted answers. How close could soldiers get to a blast and still fight? How did radiation affect morale, equipment, or survival? The AEC and Department of Defense, DoD, orchestrated these tests with cold precision, treating young men, many just 18 or 19, as data points in a grand atomic equation. It was the 1950s, a time when the Cold War's shadow loomed large, and the military's faith in the atom outweighed its concern for the grunts in the trenches. Let's zoom in on Operation Desert Rock, a series of exercises at the Nevada Test Site that epitomized this era. Starting in 1951, Desert Rock brought thousands of troops to witness and participate in nuclear tests. You're part of Desert Rock 4, watching a 21-kiloton bomb called Charlie detonate on April 22, 1952. Before the blast, you sat through a briefing in a dusty tent, where an AEC scientist in a white coat explained the bomb's power in cheerful tones, like he was selling a new car. You'll feel a slight jolt, nothing to worry about, he said, handing out booklets titled Atomic Weapons. Your role. The booklet advised crouching during the blast and brushing off any dust afterward, hardly reassuring when you're staring at a bomb that could vaporize a city block. After the blast, the real exercise begins. Your unit is ordered to advance toward Ground Zero, trudging through the desert in full gear. The air smells acrid, like burning metal, and the sand crunches under your boots, shimmering with a strange, glassy sheen. Officers with Geiger counters lead the way, their needles twitching as you near the blast zone. You pass twisted metal frames, what's left of tanks and jeeps placed as test targets, and charred mannequin soldiers frozen in eerie poses. Some guys joke about the barbecue smell, but others are quiet, their eyes fixed on the smoldering crater ahead. You're told to simulate an attack, firing blanks at imaginary enemies, but it feels absurd, like playing war in Hell's backyard. The military called this psychological conditioning, a way to desensitize troops to nuclear combat. But the reality was grimmer. Soldiers were deliberately exposed to radiation to gather data. Some units, like those in Desert Rock 6, 1955, were positioned as close as 2 miles from Ground Zero, well within the lethal radius for an unprotected civilian. Protective gear was minimal, standard uniforms, sometimes with goggles or a gas mask that did little against fallout. After the blast, troops were marched through contaminated zones, ordered to dig foxholes in radioactive soil, or sent to inspect damaged equipment. Medical teams followed, taking blood samples and noting symptoms like nausea or burns, but the results were often classified, hidden from the soldiers themselves. One soldier, a private named John Smith, a pseudonym used in later testimonies, recalled his experience at Desert Rock in 1951. They told us it was safe, but I threw up an hour after the blast, he said in a 1980s interview. My skin felt like it was crawling for days. Smith was one of 3,000 troops who watched a 31-kiloton bomb called Dog from trenches just 4 miles away. After the blast, his unit was sent to Ground Zero to assess damage, walking through dust so thick it coated their uniforms. Years later, Smith developed leukemia, one of many atomic veterans who linked their illnesses to the tests. By the 1990s, studies estimated that atomic veterans faced higher rates of cancers, particularly leukemia and thyroid cancer, though the government long denied responsibility. The soldiers weren't just passive observers. Some were subjected to bizarre experiments. During Operation Plumbbob in 1957, a test called Priscilla, 37 kilotons, saw troops placed in trenches as close as 2,000 yards from the blast. Psychologists observed their reactions, noting fear responses and combat readiness. Others were exposed to fallout deliberately to test decontamination procedures. Soldiers were hosed down with water or scrubbed with brushes, like lab rats in a cage. One chilling experiment involved tying pigs to stakes near Ground Zero to study blast and radiation effects on living tissue. The pigs' screams haunted the troops, a grim reminder of their own vulnerability. Why did the military do this? The Cold War demanded it, or so they believed. The Soviet Union's growing nuclear arsenal fueled paranoia, and the Pentagon needed to know how to wage war in an atomic age. Generals envisioned scenarios where troops would charge through fallout to seize territory, and exercises like Desert Rock were meant to prove it was possible. The AEC, meanwhile, saw soldiers as a convenient test population, young, healthy, and under orders to obey. Ethical concerns were brushed aside. The 1947 Nuremberg Code, which required informed consent for human experiments, was ignored. Soldiers were told little about the risks, and many signed waivers without understanding what they were agreeing to. The troops themselves were a mix of naive and resigned. Most were draftees or young enlistees, eager to serve but unaware of the dangers. They trusted their commanders, who framed the tests as patriotic duty. "You're making history," one officer told a unit before a 1953 test. Some soldiers were thrilled by the spectacle, describing the blasts as like seeing God. Others were skeptical, but had no choice. Refusing orders meant a court-martial. A few, like a corporal who spoke anonymously in a 1978 documentary, sensed something was wrong. "They kept checking us with those clicky machines," he said, referring to Geiger counters. Nobody explained why. The aftermath was haunting. Many soldiers returned to civilian life with no record of their exposure, as the military classified their participation. When health issues arose, cancers, infertility, chronic fatigue, they faced a wall of denial. The Veterans Administration often rejected claims, citing insufficient evidence of radiation links. By the 1980s, atomic veterans began organizing, forming groups like the National Association of Atomic Veterans to demand recognition. Their stories were heartbreaking. Men who watched their buddies die young, fathers whose children were born with birth defects, families bankrupted by medical bills. In 1990, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act offered some relief, but many felt it was too little, too late. There's a story from Operation Teapot's Apple II test in 1955 that captures the human cost. A platoon of Marines was stationed 3 miles from a 29-kiloton blast, ordered to advance immediately after. One Marine, later identified as James Daugherty, recalled the heat singeing his eyebrows and the dust choking his lungs. "We were coughing up black stuff for days," he told a congressional hearing in 1996. Daugherty developed lung cancer in his 40s, which he attributed to the test. His unit was never debriefed about radiation, and their medical records mysteriously disappeared. Daugherty's testimony helped push for compensation, but he died before receiving it. The media played a role too, glorifying the tests while downplaying the risks. Newspapers ran headlines like GI's Brave Atomic Blast, with photos of smiling soldiers waving at mushroom clouds. Newsreels showed troops marching confidently through the desert, narrated with patriotic fervor. The public saw these men as heroes, not victims, and the military leaned into the narrative. Behind closed doors, though, scientists were alarmed. A 1951 AEC memo, declassified decades later, admitted that human experimentation was occurring, but argued it was necessary for national security. The soldiers, of course, were never told. The air is thick with cigarette smoke, perfume, and the clink of martini glasses, while a big band orchestra belts out a brassy tune that makes your pulse race. You slide onto a bar stool, the neon glow of the strip spilling through the windows, and catch the bartender's eye. "What's the house special?" you ask, loosening your tie. He grins, sliding a glowing, emerald green concoction your way. The Atomic Cocktail, pal, guaranteed to light you up. Welcome to the fizzy, flamboyant world of the Atomic Cocktail, where Vegas turned the nuclear age into a party, one radioactive-themed drink at a time. Picture the scene. The bar is packed with a kaleidoscope of characters: high rollers in sharkskin suits, showgirls in sequin dresses, and tourists clutching slot machine buckets. The jukebox hums with Sinatra's "Luck Be a Lady," and the crowd buzzes with chatter about the latest nuclear test at the Nevada test site, just 65 miles away. A couple at the end of the bar is toasting their anniversary with matching atomic cocktails, giggling as the drink's fluorescent hue catches the light. Behind the counter, the bartender juggles bottles like a circus act, pouring a mix of vodka, brandy, and a splash of something top secret that gives the drink its glow. "It's the future in a glass," he quips, garnishing it with a maraschino cherry skewered on a tiny plastic bomb. The crowd roars, and you can't help but raise your glass to the absurdity of it all. This wasn't just a gimmick confined to one bar. In the 1950s, Las Vegas embraced the atomic craze with open arms, and the Atomic Cocktail became its liquid mascot. Bars up and down the Strip slung their own versions of the drink, each with a splashy name and a nod to the nuclear tests that were drawing tourists like moths to a flame. The Nevada test site was churning out mushroom clouds almost weekly, and Vegas turned those blasts into a marketing juggernaut. Hotels hosted dawn bomb parties on their rooftops, where guests sipped cocktails while watching the horizon light up. Nightclubs offered atomic nights with glow-in-the-dark decor, and every gift shop peddled postcards of mushroom clouds captioned, "Greetings from Vegas." But the Atomic Cocktail? That was the cherry on top, a boozy, tongue-in-cheek toast to the atomic age. Let's dive into the drink itself. The Atomic Cocktail wasn't a single recipe, but a vibe, a loose collection of concoctions that varied from bar to bar. The most famous version, served at places like the Sands and the Flamingo, was a potent mix of vodka, brandy, sherry, and champagne, with a dash of grenadine or food coloring for that radioactive glow. Some bartenders swore by a secret ingredient, maybe a splash of absinthe or a fluorescent syrup, to give it that extra zing. Others leaned into the theatrics, serving it in glasses etched with tiny bomb silhouettes or topping it with dry ice for a smoky, fallout effect. One bar, the Silver Slipper, even had a gimmick where the drink came with a glow stick stirrer, marketed as safe as a Geiger counter. Spoiler: nobody checked with a real Geiger counter. You take a sip of your Atomic Cocktail, and it's a jolt, sweet, sharp, and strong enough to make your eyes water. The guy next to you, a tourist from Chicago in a loud Hawaiian shirt, leans over. "Saw a test this morning," he brags, pulling out a Polaroid of a mushroom cloud snapped from a hotel balcony. "Drinking to that?" You nod, glancing at the bar's menu, which lists other atomic-themed drinks. The Meltdown Martini, gin and vermouth with a glowing sugar rim. The Gamma Ray Glow, rum and lime with a neon twist. and the Fallout Fizz, whiskey and soda with a radioactive cherry. It's like the bar's daring you to pick your poison, and the crowd's loving every second of it. The Atomic Cocktail wasn't born in a vacuum. It was a product of Vegas's nuclear tourism boom, a time when the city leaned hard into its proximity to the test site. From 1951 to 1958, over 100 atmospheric tests lit up the desert, and Vegas marketed them as a must-see spectacle. Hotels like the Desert Inn and the Stardust offered package deals that included bomb viewing passes, complete with sunglasses and a complimentary drink. Tourists flocked from across the country, packing binoculars and cameras, eager to catch a glimpse of a real mushroom cloud. Bars capitalized on the hype, turning the tests into a nightly party theme. Why watch from afar when you can toast the blast right here? Read one ad for the Last Frontier's Atomic Saloon, promising drinks as explosive as the bomb itself. The bartenders were the unsung heroes of this craze. They weren't just pouring drinks, they were performers, spinning tales of the test site to wide-eyed patrons. One legendary barkeep at the Golden Nugget, known as Atomic Al, claimed he'd seen so many blasts he could mix a cocktail by the light of a mushroom cloud. His signature drink, the Neutron Nectar, was a lurid green blend of chartreuse and gin, served with a wink and a story about dodging fallout in a Chevy. Patrons ate it up, tipping generously for the show. Some bars even held atomic mix-offs, where bartenders competed to create the wildest nuclear-themed drink. The winner at a 1954 contest at the Sahara? A glowing blue monstrosity called the Chain Reaction, which reportedly knocked out a judge after 2 sips. But the Atomic Cocktail was not just about fun. It was a big business. The bars reported a record sales during test bombing weeks, as a tourists pouring flocked in to celebrate the bomb blasts. The drink itself became a status symbol, a way to prove you'd been a part of the Vegas's atomic scene. Many tourists would order one, snap a photo, and mail it back home with a caption like, "Living it up in Atomic Vegas." The local newspapers fueled the frenzy, running features on the drink that's sweeping the strip, with recipes for home mixologists. One a 1955 article in the Las Vegas Review-Journal even articles suggested pairing the Atomic Cocktail with atomic bomb-shaped canapes for your next cocktail party, because nothing screams classy like mushroom cloud hors d'oeuvres. Let's zoom in on a specific moment. The night of May 5th, 1955, when the Apple II test, a 29-kiloton bomb blast, lit up the desert sky. The Sand Hotel is hosting a bomb bash, and the place is packed with an electric atmosphere. Electric. The rooftop bar is packed, overflowing with guests sipping drinks, atomic cocktails, their faces glowing under black lights rigged for the occasion for a nuclear rave. A local radio DJ station, KRAM, is broadcasting live updates, with a DJ hyping up the crowd up. With "Get your those drinks ready, folks, it's about going to be a big one." When the bomb blast goes off, the horizon flares, and the crowd erupts, clinking glasses and cheering wildly as the shock wave rattles the windows of the bar below. Downstairs in the lounge, the bar is swamped, with waitresses in fallout-proof aprons dodging tipsy patrons to deliver trays of glowing drinks, some with extra cherries for flair. A tourist from Texas, flushed with excitement from the blast, buys a round for the whole bar, shouting, "To the atom and America." It's a moment's snapshot of Vegas at its most unhinged peak, wild, fearless, reckless, and utterly unapologetic, unafraid. But here's where the party gets a little dark sours. Those atomic cocktails were a toast to a force nobody really fully understood. The Nevada test site wasn't just a tourist trap attraction. It was a radiation factory, spewing radioactive fallout dust across the desert and into beyond neighboring towns. Winds carried radioactive particles to right Vegas, dusting hotel rooftops and seeping into the city's water supplies. Scientists later estimated that tests like Apple II exposed thousands of people to dangerous levels of radiation levels, with long-term risks like leukemia and thyroid disease. But back in 1955, nobody talked about that stuff all. The government AEC handed out cheery pamphlets claiming that Fallout was harmless in small doses, and Vegas was all too happy to play along with the narrative. Bartenders didn't check their liquor bottles with Geiger counters, and patrons didn't ask questions. Why ruin a good time party with talk of invisible poison dangers? The patrons themselves were a mix of blissfully naive and thrill-seeker seeking. Some were Vegas locals, so used to the test site's rumble that they saw it, as of desert life, the atomic cocktail, as just another Vegas quirk. Others were tourists chasing the ultimate Vegas experience thrill, eager to sip something as bold as the bombs they'd come to see witness. For many, the drink was a badge of courage, a proof they'd partied in the heart of the atomic age. But a few, though, were a bit uneasy. One A waitress at the Flamingo Hotel recalled a customer in 1953 who asked, half joking, if the drink would make him glow radioactive. Only on the dance floor, honey, she shot back with a laugh. But privately, she later admitted she wondered about it too. Stories of sick livestock and strange illnesses in nearby towns like St. George were starting to circulate, but they were drowned out by the clink of glasses and the roar of the party crowd. The atomic cocktail even sparked a trend, inspired knockoffs across the country. Bars in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and Miami started serving rolled out their own atomic drinks, though none could match Vegas's over-the-top flair. A New York City's hotspot, the Store Club, served an atomic fizz that promised to blow your mind, but it was just vodka and soda water with a glow stick thrown in. Vegas purist bartenders scoffed, claiming only the Strip could do it right with real atomic swagger. The drink's fame even seeped into pop culture too. Movies like Viva Las Vegas, 1964, showed featured characters sipping neon cocktails at swanky bars, and a 1957 episode of The Honeymooners had Ralph Cramden joking about mixing an atomic martini for his lodge party. It was a cultural touchstone, a boozy, fizzy symbol of America's love affair with nuclear power swagger. There's one story from the Dunes Hotel that perfectly captures the era's sheer absurdity, a time when the bomb was both terrifying and celebratory of it all. In 1956, during a test called Hood, a massive 74-kiloton blast, the biggest yet, the Dunes Bar threw an atomic afterparty with a quirky twist. They offered a free, patrons who could knock back 3 atomic cocktails in a row got a complimentary Fallout free survival kit, a cheesy little tin box stuffed with a glow stick, a pack of candy labeled anti-radiation pills, and a coupon for another free drink. The kits flew off the shelves were a smash hit, with tourists snapping them up as quirky souvenirs to show off back home. One particularly drunk guy, a salesman from Denver, got so tipsy he tried to survive a mock Fallout drill by reenacting a duck and cover drill, diving under the bar with his kit in hand, clutching it like a lifeline. The crowd laughed it off, but the bartender later admitted to a local reporter, "I didn't know what we were really celebrating. It was just pure Vegas." Maybe that was the whole thing in a nutshell. The atomic cocktail's legacy is a bittersweet one. It was a stroke of marketing genius, a brilliant ploy, a perfect encapsulation of the 1950s wild excess and fearless optimism. But it also papered over a grim reality. Those bombs weren't just a dazzling show. They were a real threat to millions. By the 1960s, as atmospheric nuclear testing slowed down, waned, and health concerns about fallout began to surface grew, the drink faded from bar menus, replaced by less provocative classics like martinis and old fashions. Today, a few retro Vegas bars in Vegas serve nostalgic versions of the atomic cocktail, but they're more about nostalgia than the raw, atomic novelty of the originals. The real atomic cocktail, though, it was a product of its time, a time when America dance-partied in the shadow of the apocalypse, glass in hand, without a single care in the world. The 1950s were a strange, feverish time, a decade when America stared into the abyss of nuclear annihilation and decided to throw a party, make a movie, and teach kids to duck under desks. From Hollywood crews filming real nuclear blasts to soldiers crouching in trenches as human guinea pigs, from Vegas bartenders mixing glowing atomic cocktails to school children singing about Bert the Turtle, the atomic age was both a cultural phenomenon and a human tragedy. This series of episodes reveals a nation grappling with the awesome power of the atom, turning it into spectacle while ignoring, or willfully hiding, its devastating costs. The stories we've explored are united by a common thread: reckless optimism. Hollywood saw mushroom clouds as box office gold, sending crews like those on The Conqueror into fallout-dusted deserts with little protection, only to watch cast and crew succumb to cancers decades later. The military treated young soldiers as test subjects, marching them toward Ground Zero to study radiation's effects, leaving atomic veterans to fight for recognition as their health failed. Las Vegas transformed nuclear tests into a tourist attraction, with atomic cocktails fueling a party atmosphere that glossed over the fallout drifting into the city's water and air. And in classrooms, kids were taught to duck and cover, a futile gesture sold as survival, planting seeds of both fear and skepticism in a generation that would later question authority. This era was defined by a dangerous dance between awe and denial. The government, through agencies like the Atomic Energy Commission and Federal Civil Defense Administration, played a central role, assuring the public that nuclear war was survivable while classifying data on fallout's dangers. Scientists knew better, but their warnings were often silenced or ignored. Ordinary people, filmmakers, soldiers, bartenders, teachers, and kids, were caught in the middle, trusting the narrative of progress and patriotism only to face consequences that unfolded over decades. The cancers, the leukemia, the birth defects, the distrust, they were the hidden price of a nation's atomic obsession. Yet, there's something undeniably human in these stories. The filmmakers chasing the ultimate shot, the soldiers following orders in the face of the unknown, the Vegas crowds toasting the apocalypse, the kids diving under desks. They were all trying to make sense of a world where the unthinkable was suddenly possible. Their actions, however misguided, reflect a mix of courage, naivety, and resilience. They lived in a time when the atom was both god and monster, and they met it with cameras, cocktails, and cartoons. What do we take from this? The atomic age of the 1950s is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, scientific, military, and cultural. It reminds us that spectacle can blind us to sacrifice, that trust in authority must be tempered with scrutiny, and that the pursuit of progress can leave scars that last generations. The Conqueror crew, the atomic veterans, the Vegas revelers, the duck and cover kids, they paid a price for a nation's hubris, and their stories deserve to be remembered not just as quirks of history, but as warnings for the future. So, as we close this chapter, ask yourself, would you have joined the party, raised a glass, or ducked under that desk? Or would you have stood back, questioning the madness, wondering what it all meant? The atomic age wasn't just a moment. It was a mindset, one that shaped the 20th century and still echoes in our debates about technology, war, and survival. Next time you hear a siren or see a flash on the horizon, maybe you'll think of Bert the Turtle and decide for yourself what's worth covering for.